So this week we're going to talk about what I'm going to call the long form blog. This is kind of an umbrella term for a lot of web-based content that you'll encounter. Um, but basically, what I'm asking you to do with this assignment is to take your research paper's argument, your main point, and your reasons and your evidence and transform that for another audience, another medium, another platform. So the long form blog is sort of a middle ground between super informal writing like you might do for social media and super formal writing like you do for most of your classes. Um, and it's actually becoming a very common academic genre that you should probably be able to do. It's sort of replaced in many ways the magazine article, and it functions very much like the old magazine article, but it's obviously web optimized rather than print optimized. So there's several mediums and modes involved. I should clarify. Okay, so the term medium refers to the uh, the substance of what you're working with. So when you ask an artist, what medium are you working with? They'll answer something like, I'm working with clay, I'm working with oil on canvas. So the physicality of it is the medium. Mode refers to what it is you're manipulating that makes the meaning. So you might have the verbal mode where we're using words. This is both a verbal and a visual mode that I'm working in right now, where I'm using gestures and video as well as my words. And there's a few other meaning making modes that might be analyzed in the same situation. So you'll hear the terms multimedia and multimodal bandied about, and you'll hear them used almost synonymously, and they almost are, but they're not. Um, so in this case, you have multiple modes that you're working with and multiple media that are available to you. So the modes that you have text, obviously, written word. You have multiple visual modes such as color and layout available to you. You can also include video and audio as needed in a blog. That's one advantage that it has over the old magazine formats. But just keep in mind that your medium is the screen, basically. So it's got to be web optimized. Now, your audience also shifts for this assignment. So you're going to have to define your audience because the blog as a genre does not have a specific audience. It's every blog defines its own audience by who is it trying to attract as users, as viewers. Um, so one of the things you'll do in your planning activity, of course, is um, actually decide who is the audience that you're trying to attract and what role are you giving them uh, in your blog. So, for instance, you might say you're writing for parents. There's a whole subgenre of the mommy blog, which is parents writing for other parents. Are you writing for seniors? Are you writing for youth, like teenagers? Um, are you writing for other professionals in your industry? Industry blogs are a really common niche audience. So you might have, say, a blog that is maintained by a an undertaker for other undertakers. I mean, or by a construction contractor for other construction contractors. That's very common. And what is your relationship to that audience? So, in that example of industry blogs, you have an industry insider addressing themselves to other industry insiders. In the example of the mommy blog, you have a member of the target audience addressing themselves to the member of the target audience, a parent writing for other parents. But there are other kinds of relationships you can have as well. So, sometimes a blog will position itself as an insider guiding outsiders. So you'll see this a lot with like real estate type blogs and stuff where they're like insider tips, your step-by-step guide to buying your first home, that kind of thing. So you've got an insider guiding the outsider. Or you might see clickbait headlines, what this industry doesn't want you to know. That's that same positioning. Another kind, and this is much rarer, you can have an outsider offering a fresh perspective to the insiders. So you might have a blog, for instance, that says, this is a student's perspective on what works best for teachers to try. Um, So the key here is, what is your ethos? What is your appeal as an authority? Where are you getting your authority from? And how are you going to establish that authority quickly and efficiently so that you have that immediate relationship with your audience? And how are you going to define that audience's role so that they enter into that relationship? Another thing that you'll need to think about when you're working on this assignment is style. So the style of writing that you choose, the words that you choose, the grammar structures that you use, even the font that you choose, the layout on the page, all of that stuff, is going to vary from one blog to another. There's no set template this time. It's not like with academic writing where we can say, well, I'm using MLA style and everything's kind of dictated for you. Um, so it varies. So the key here is, again, think about who your audience is and what your relationship to that audience is and what kind of a persona you want to project. For instance, when setting up the Blackboard page for this class, I had a choice of what colors do I want to use, and you may have noticed that I chose a black and red scheme. I did this very deliberately because I'm emphasizing my role as a representative of Ball State, as your teacher, uh, by using that red, black, and white scheme to echo the cardinal and white colors of Ball State. I also chose it because I find it very legible and I happen to like it. But that's a personal choice that reflects, again, part of who I am and who I am projecting myself to be and who I expect you to be. Um, so think very carefully about that. Other stylistic concerns you might think about is the ratio of visual to written material. So some blogs focus very heavily on how much writing they have and quality writing at that. And they'll look more like something out of like the Huffington Post, because that's what their audience is expecting. They expect a sort of a long form read, and that's what they're in for. So that's an option. Whereas there are other blogs out there that are entirely images. I read Cake Rex every day, for instance, and there's very little writing involved. And half the time, I don't even read the writing in it because I'm just there for the pictures. And the people who run that blog know I'm just there for the pictures. But there are other blogs that I would read, like Play the Past, that I've contributed to a couple times. That's a scholarly blog on how video games and history interact. Well, I'm not there for the pictures. Half the time I ignore the pictures. I'm there for what they have to say. I'm there for the words. So think very carefully about what your audience might be interested in, your imagined audience in this case, like we've talked about in the previous video, and how you want to balance words and images and what ratio of words to images you want to have. Some other things you want to think about are the conventional parts that you would expect to find in a long form blog. So, of course, you need a title because you need something to index that blog with, something they can click on. Your title should be inviting, interesting, and it should tell your reader what the post is about, and it should not be clickbaity. Don't do this. These 5 points about whatever are going to blow your mind. No, don't be clickbaity. People are really resisting that right now, so your audience isn't going to be as interested in it. So just be informative. Casual and informative title, which should be kind of similar to the title that you use for your essay, really. You'll need some kind of a byline, which is where you say who you are. So you give your name, and you might put a picture of yourself, or that represents yourself, and you might even have a little bio. This sometimes appears at the very beginning, and sometimes it appears at the end, and sometimes it appears in a sidebar. So you can choose where you want to put that information. And it depends heavily on what you anticipate your audience wants to know about you. An index image. In order to feature a blog post on another website, or to share it on social media or even on the blog's own homepage, there often has to be an image associated with it to create the clickable box. And so this is typically going to be the first picture that appears in the blog, although not always. So you need to have some kind of a default image So there has to be at least one picture in your blog. And it should be visually arresting, and it should offer some kind of clue to what your argument's about, or at least your topic. It shouldn't just be random. So if you're writing a blog about the effectiveness um, of positive comments in teaching, maybe just don't just put a penguin there, But if you're writing about penguins, put a penguin there. So also consider that you'll need some amount of writing. Paragraphs in blogs tend to be much shorter than in academic writing. Sometimes they're only one word. Remember that large blocks of text are really hard to read on a screen. So, this is golden rule time. Treat your readers the way you want to be treated. I know you don't want to sit there and read just huge chunks of text on a screen. That's hard to do. Our eyes don't concentrate well on it. So optimize your writing to be digested in small pieces. And then finally, think very hard about your visuals. Charts are great, and we'll talk in a later video about how to optimize those. Visual markers are very important. Use images, you can embed videos if you want. You can do all kinds of things. As always, go find examples. Maybe there's a blog you've always followed and always admired, and maybe you want to imitate that. Or maybe you used some blog posts as sources in your research paper. Go imitate that. Remember, imitation is not the same as copying. So it's totally ethical, and that's how we all learn. So go find examples and have fun with it. This should be a much lighter assignment.